Hey guys, it's Ben from 2X Space Station. How's everybody doing? This is going to be a video response to Bucky 749. There's been a few responses doing the rounds to this, and these are 90s community questions. The 90s is a decade that will always have a place in my heart because it was when I went to school, when I grew up. So many of the TV shows and things that I used to watch back then were, just stay with me today as really strong memories. And this is off the back of seeing Kit 171's video response, which was really good. I'll post a link to the original video in the description below, so if you fancy doing a response, then please do it and post the link on Bucky 749's channel. So the first question is favourite cartoon you own on DVD or favourite cartoon. So if I was going to go for the one that I actually own on DVD, there are not very many of those. But I did treat myself to buying both of the box sets for the Raccoons movies back in the day. And this is the season 2 of the Raccoons. Now the Raccoons I think spanned kind of mid-80s. I think it started around 85 and went on into the 90s. And it was the show that was on at that kind of prime time viewing spot for kids, which is Saturday morning TV. So I'd get out of bed in my pajamas, run downstairs, eat some cereal while watching TV, and the Raccoons was a show that I kind of got very transfixed with. I mean, all of the shows that were on at that time of the day were great. Like, I remember there were some darker cartoons like Batman. Batman I really enjoyed, but it's a bit of a different kind of tone. The Raccoons is just very iconic. I think that the art style and the way that the Raccoons are characterized is fantastic. It's got some really cute, quite memorable songs that are in there, and I think the most awesome part about it is Cyril Sneer. Cyril Sneer is just an amazing character. You know, the old kind of like wheeler dealer guy with the crooked nose and the cigar coming out of his mouth. He's basically a like capitalist oil baron sort of guy. He's always like trying to get the Raccoons to do things that'll trash the environment. And it's just a very fun show, and I think I bought it when I just kind of wanted something comforting to watch that would, be peaceful and relaxing and take me back to my childhood. So the Raccoons is actually the only 90s cartoon that I've got on DVD. Probably the favourite cartoon overall would have been the original Pokemon cartoons, and I used to love those so much that I would record them in the morning before going to school, watch most of it in the morning, and then after school I'd come back and I'd play the VHS tapes back, and I'd end up with, back in the day people used to have VHS tapes with all their favourite stuff on them. I remember my friend did that with Ren and Stimpy as well, and I really liked Ren and Stimpy. But yes, I think I'd have to go for the Raccoons if it's DVD that I own, or Pokemon otherwise. Question number 2 is an infamous question that's been a battle that's raged on for decades now. Kit 171 kind of didn't want to get into it too much and sort of was saying, I think it's time that this kind of old battle between these two is over, but it's the Sega or Nintendo question. Now, I'll answer it from the point of view of being a kid in the 90s because, apart from the Game Boy, which was a really big deal for me, my answer would have to be Sega, because the Mega Drive was the system that I envied everybody else having. The Mega Drive was the system that my best friend Chris Walsh had, and that was the system that I was first gifted. So it was my first video games console that was personally for me. I got that on Christmas morning. I don't know how old I was, maybe 9 or 10, and I got the original Sonic game and Castle of Illusion with it, and I was absolutely made up. I mean, I was completely over the moon. And a lot of those early games, Shinobi, Golden Axe, things like Super Hang-On, they're so iconic to me that it will have to be Sega. That said, I didn't have any problem with Nintendo. It wasn't like a us versus them thing. It was just where my experience mostly was. But it's very difficult to answer because the Game Boy was a complete game changer, and Pokemon, Zelda, various different games on the Game Boy really changed my childhood dramatically, and I still love playing the Mario games on there. But, handheld consoles aside, it was always about the Sega Mega Drive for me growing up, or the Genesis if you're in America. Interestingly enough, I bought myself an SNES recently to kind of go back and see what I was missing out on and try and see the other side of the coin. And, I've got to say the SNES is a fantastic console. It's very capable, and the games on it are absolutely superb. So it's really a false dichotomy, isn't it? Sega and Nintendo, they're both fantastic. And I think if you have one without the other, you're definitely missing out on some of the best things that the 90s had to offer. Favorite console game? it has to go to Pokemon. I think Pokemon came out in like 1997. I've still got my original blue cartridge. It's got over 100 hours on it. I still sometimes play Pokemon to this day because thankfully people have made like ROM hacks of it. So I've been playing like modded versions with extra difficulty, or you can get randomizers now where you sort of randomize where the Pokemon will be and what you can start with. That was a game that really just changed everything. It linked in with the TV show. I collected the Pokemon cards. I traded with my friends. We'd take our Game Boys to school. We'd battle, and that whole craze just completely took over my life. And I can remember so many times just hanging out in my friend's house, playing Pokemon, battling, and it was just amazing. I never did manage to complete the Pokedex. I think I was a couple short of it, but I do remember my friend managed to get hold of a Mew after going to one of the special events, and he came back and he cloned me this Mew, and it was like, we couldn't believe it. The 151 was the Pokedex number for Mew, if I remember correctly, and it was just like, man, this game. I remember I loved my Gengar. You had to trade to evolve into a Gengar, and when I managed to get that upgrade, I was just like, God, this is the best Pokemon ever. I still like Gengar to this day because I think he looks kind of cute, but actually Gengar is kind of menacing. It's like a ghost that eats people's dreams or something. It's like actually weirdly dark. But yeah, that's what I'd have to choose. Favorite comics? So I was never really into comics. It's not something that I'm particularly bothered about. I did buy a couple of the very early Pokemon mangas, and I still have a couple of those now, which might be worth something these days. I'll have to check that out. But it wasn't really a thing that I was bothered with. If I was to think about like what comics remind me of being a kid, then it would be things like Beano. But I just never really bother with them. It just wasn't a kind of thing that stuck with me. Apart from, as I said, as part of the Pokemon Mania, I did branch out and get a couple of Pokemon comics back in the day. Favorite pro wrestler? God, everybody was obsessed with wrestling when we were at school. It was never something that I was all that bothered about, but I did get some of the figurines handed down from my cousin, I think, and also some of the old VHS tapes of WWE. WWE? Yeah, I think that's what it was. It was never really my thing, but I do remember it. It's very iconic from the 90s. And I always liked the Brothers Doom. Now, that's technically two wrestlers. And I think I had figurines of those guys. If you can remember, they were the guys with the big shoulder pads that had spikes coming out of them. And I always thought they kind of looked absolutely ridiculous. But then some of my friends really did start getting into wrestling massively, and they had loads of the figures. And that was when I was kind of like, I'm kind of out. Wasn't really my thing so much. Next one is favorite song and music video. So sticking kind of with a late 90s theme, actually around the time of Pokemon, Blink-182 were a really big deal. Blink-182's breakthrough album, Enema of the State, just changed my life. It was when I was getting into girls, and me and my friend would listen to it on like long summer's days and play it over and over again. And I knew all the songs pretty much off by heart. And I think that I'd probably pick All the Small Things, which is like one of their most well-known singles. It had a pretty funny music video. It was a music video when they were kind of like taking the piss out of other 90s pop bands at the time. So I quite like that. Although you could also pick What's My Age Again, which had a fantastic video when they're running through the streets naked. And either of those two would do it for me. And I think that for anyone who of like my age group, like if you I went to a house party recently, people who kind of in their early 30s now, if you put like Blink-182, All the Small Things on, everybody's going to love it because it just reminds me of that time. Similarly, Wheatus, Teenage Dirtbag, though I'm not sure if that was technically 90s. That might have just been into the 2000s, but still kind of similar era of music and similarly iconic. Favorite live action TV show and episode? Hard to know exactly how live action is defined, but I think it's like, recorded in the flesh and possibly with a live audience. And I'd have to go with Red Dwarf. Red Dwarf was the show that I watched when I was a kid all the time. It's amazing that it's kind of having a resurgence on Dave. They're thinking of doing a feature-length film very soon. I loved Red Dwarf. And it was like a treat that I was allowed to watch when I was a kid. So like if my mum and dad were out and the babysitter was looking after us, they'd let us watch Red Dwarf before we went to bed. That was like the bartering chip. And I think that it was a kind of classic period in the early Red Dwarf times, kind of in the early 90s. That must have been about season 3 or 4, when it just kind of really was amazing. Picking my favorite episode is not easy. I think probably it would be Polymorph. I always found it really funny with a Dwayne Dibley, where Kat gets transmutated into this nerdy character. I think that was Polymorph. I forget the names of them now. But man, those episodes just make me laugh my arse off thinking about them. So thank you to Bucky749 for this trip down the 90s memory lane. I look forward to hearing your responses to these guys. Let me know in the comments below if you've posted a response. Let me know what you think about my choices. And also, please do post a VR on Bucky749's channel. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.